At the risk of sounding slick and or glib, nuns really are having a moment. It's not exactly clear to me why that is. Actually, it kind of is clear to me why that is. We're going to be talking about all the things all the life hacks you can learn from 16th century nuns. We'll also talk to a contemporary nun, but an Episcopalian nun. A lot of people don't even know that's a thing. And we will reflect on why suddenly rock stars are showing up in habits and wimples and things like that. There's a more serious subtext to all that, I promise you. So get ready for an unusual show about sisters.
Dominique et Nique s'en allaient tout simplement, ô Dieu, pauvre et chantant. En tout chemin, en tout lieu, il ne parle que du bon Dieu, il ne parle que du bon Dieu. À l'époque où Jean sans terre d'Angleterre était le roi, Dominique, notre père, combattit les...
See, if you didn't grow up in the 60s, this is not going to mean anything to you. But this is Sourire, a French nun who became the singing nun. And this song was a hit, and I mean an international hit, top 10 on the charts, pretty much everywhere. The story has kind of a sad ending, which I won't tell you. But we're going to be talking about nuns today. We're going to be talking about them in several different centuries all at once, but we're going to begin with Sister Monica Clare, the Sister Superior at the community of St. John Baptist at an Episcopal convent based in New Jersey. She's also a spiritual counselor specializing in religious trauma, mental illness, and addiction, and she's the author of A Change of Habit, Leaving Behind My Husband, Career, and Everything I Owned to Become a Nun. You can follow her on the TikToks at Nonsense for the People. Sister Monica, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you are not my first Episcopal nun, but I think probably there are a lot of people out there who are saying, what? Aren't all nuns Catholic? So maybe start there. Explain why that actually is a possibility to be an Episcopalian nun.
Well, I did not know that Episcopal nuns existed either, and I had felt called to be a nun my whole life, but didn't feel comfortable with becoming a Roman Catholic because I'm a little too liberal. And it was a Roman Catholic nun who told me that the Episcopalians have nuns. And I kept asking, why does nobody know this? And it goes back to the 16th century when the Church of England separated from the Roman Catholic Church. And they were trying to bring back things that were considered too Catholic into the Church of England. And one of those was religious orders. And people were very much opposed to it in the very beginning when they were revived in the 19th century. So we're still kind of under the radar. We're kind of embarrassed about ourselves. It's kind of small, but we're still here.
And we're glad that you are.
Thank you.
You have a background in theater and comedy, and I
Yes.
think you think it is not unconnected to some of what you do as a nun. Explain that connection, though.
Well, I got into theater because I was pathologically shy, and it was really, really hard for me to talk to people, to meet people. I would just sort of shut down and freeze. So theater really helped me come out of my shell. And they also taught me how to speak without a Southern accent. I'm from Georgia. And how to present myself on stage, talking from my diaphragm and speaking in front of groups of people. And I thought that that would be pretty useless in a religious vocation, but it turns out that church and theater are not too far apart, because if I have to read scripture in a setting, a church setting, I can project from my diaphragm. I have good diction because I went to acting school. And for the most part, my shyness, it's still there, but I can pretend it's not. So that helped me.
So I want to come back to this in a second, but I also want to explore this a little bit. One of the first things you said was you always felt called to be a nun. You did not, however, grow up in a particularly devout family, right?
No, my parents were children of the 60s. They were what I called like country fried hippies because they were still very Southern and traditional in some ways, but they were also very hippie-ish. People thought my mother was weird because she was into astrology and yoga. And this was like the late 60s, early 70s. And she was always kind of countercultural. which interestingly enough fed into my being countercultural and rejecting female stereotypes. But my mother also had a very open view of religion and spirituality. She sees herself as mostly Native American spirituality with a lot of Buddhism thrown in. So she helped me to understand different ways of thinking about religion. And then my grandmother was extremely like hardcore Southern Baptist. So it was from her I learned about the Bible and the traditions of religion. And it was a very pleasant experience. It wasn't one of those traumatic religious experiences. So I had a little bit of both. It took a long time for my mother to understand that, because she kept saying I was too churchy and the boys wouldn't like me. So when I finally sort of came out of the closet as a nun, I had to tell her, this is why I'm so churchy. I want to be a nun. And God bless her, she finally accepted it. So thank God.
I love the idea of coming out of the closet as a nun, which I guess could be understood two different ways, actually. But
Yes.
and speaking of that, you do have a background in comedy. You were in the legendary troupe, the Groundlings. Yes. I think you overlapped with Jennifer Coolidge. And, I mean, to some degree, I think one of the kind of archetypes we have of nuns is severe. Now, I've known a lot of nuns, and very few of them have been severe. A number of them have been quite funny. But you are sort of playing against at least a kind of mental type we have, right?
Definitely. And that's one of the things that I really wanted to do with all the social media and all the outreach I do, is to get rid of the stereotypes of nuns. Because, I mean, we come by a lot of those stereotypes, honestly. There were a lot of severe nuns who did a lot of damage back in the old days. But the ones that are truly called, that are nuns to their core, are mostly funny nerds who have a very bizarre sense of humor. We laugh a lot in community, and we are friends with Roman Catholic nuns, and I can tell you that they also laugh and have a very nerdy, hilarious sense of humor. So that was a pleasant surprise when I started hanging out with monks and nuns, how funny they are.
Yes, that's going to come up actually with our guests a little bit later, who look at nuns in the 16th, 15th, 14th century. That they often do like, hanging out and hanging around and just trading jokes with each other and stuff like that. Yeah. So it's also interesting because you are, as you say, not an extrovert. You're an introverted person. One of the things that you did as, I think, part of your ingestion into the world of being a nun is take a Myers-Briggs personality test.
Yes.
But then there you are also, and believe me, I totally get this because I'm an introvert. But there you are on TikTok. Just direct to camera, and then I saw you do a Reddit AMA, Ask Me Anything, where somebody complimented you on your moisturizer. You're the first nun to get a compliment about a moisturizer.
Totally crazy.
But so you're doing this. I mean, you've already essentially said this. This is how you reach people, right? If you're going to be an evangelist of any kind, or even just useful to people the way that I think nuns sometimes think of themselves being, you're not going to be able to do it the way that it was done in the 19th century.
Absolutely. The church has changed and become much more focused on compassion and humanity, which means we're trying to go back to how Jesus was with people, to be accessible. Jesus, I think, probably had a really great sense of humor, or else he wouldn't have had that many friends. He was open and inclusive of everyone, literally everyone. And I try to make people understand that this old industrial model of convents, where you had hundreds of thousands of cogs in the machine and they were just faceless and invisible, that's the old model. That's the Victorian and medieval way of looking at monasteries and convents. Now we are actual people. We're not cardboard saints. We don't hover above the ground when we move. We have all the faults and all the great things of regular human beings, and our individuality is encouraged to come out.
I think a lot of people don't know very much about the process of becoming a nun, and I think they probably think it's, one day you're a civilian and the next day you're a nun. It's not like that at all, right? There's a long process you had to go through.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. I showed up with a guitar and a suitcase and thought they were just going to put a veil on me, and I didn't realize it's actually a long process on both sides. I tell people it's more like if you're a college professor and you're trying to get tenure. It takes years and years to get to the point where you have tenure, where you're in it for life. And that's exactly, of course, the university system was sort of modeled on convents and monasteries from the very beginning. So there is that process of leveling up, but it's not quick. In the Victorian age, they started leveling up sisters too quickly. It was 2 to 3 years, and you were life professed, which meant you were in it forever. You'd pretty much have to murder somebody to get kicked out. And now it's 6 to 8 years because they feel like a person really needs to discern whether they're in the right place, and the community needs to discern whether this person definitely has a vocation to the religious life. I was really mad when I found out how long it takes. It took me 6 years, almost 7 years. And I was so frustrated because I have zero patience. But now I can look back and see the wisdom of that long process to becoming tenured, like professed.
Well, so one difference between being a tenured professor and a postulant and trying to become a nun, I don't think they care whether the professors have a lot of credit card debt. But this is actually something that comes up, right? You have to be debt-free?
Absolutely. A lot of people don't realize the decisions of organized religion are sometimes based on finances. Like the whole idea of Catholic priests being unable to be married and have children was based on finance and hereditary issues. It wasn't really based on anything spiritual. It was just more of a wise financial decision for that denomination at that time. And in our communities, we do say that, and in Roman Catholic communities as well, you have to be debt-free when you come in because you're not going to have enough. If you have a job that earns money, all your money has to go to the central fund of the convent. We don't have our own bank accounts. We don't have any possessions or assets of our own. And if you come in with a lot of debt and you have to pay it down, you're not going to be able to be at the convent learning the religious life if you're out working to pay off your debt. We're dialoguing with Roman Catholic communities about programs to get rid of people's debt because it's a big stumbling block. So we've come up with some pretty good ideas, and we're sort of collaborating on how we can help people, like a scholarship fund and things like that.
You know, one of the things that surprised me a little bit when you did the Reddit Ask Me Anything, which first of all was a great idea, another way to kind of reach people and reach a certain kind of person you're not going to find other ways. So people would ask you questions about their despondency or demoralization or whatever. And some of the things you would suggest would be take a Myers-Briggs test, do an Enneagram thing, learn more about yourself that way. At one point, I think you might have recommended the book, What Color is Your Parachute? I mean, it wasn't like you said, okay, there's a Karl Barth book that you really have to read. So say a little bit about that, you know, I mean, I think people ask a nun, what do I do? They probably expect to hear some prayers and that you need to say or some treatises you need to read, but you're going at this in a different way.
Yeah, I'm just fundamentally a very practical person. And I got very frustrated when I was trying to discern my vocation because there was that question of, is this something that God is actually calling me to, or is this just another one of my crazy ideas? And anytime I talk to religious people about it, I would get these kind of vague, esoteric answers. And so I started looking at, I couldn't afford therapy at the time, so I started looking at self-help books. And a lot of them were about determining your career path. And that's where I got the idea, like in What Color is Your Parachute, of making a list of your values and trying to construct a life that aligns with those values. Because I was shocked that my number one value was God. And I was not living my life in that particular way. I wasn't going to church regularly. I didn't talk about my faith at that point. That was like the late 90s. And then I started looking at personality tests because I thought, am I really suited to this life? And it turns out, yes, I was born to do this. Either this or being a librarian. That's what Myers-Briggs told me.
Am I looking at a fellow INTP? That's what I am.
Oh, my condolences.
You're something else. Okay.
It's hard. I'm INFJ.
INFJ. We couldn't be more different except for the first two. But
I know.
So you gave up a lot, as has already been suggested. You gave up. You'd been married. You had a husband. You gave up possessions and money and a lot of other things, and maybe some control of your life. What did you get? Explain what I don't know if this is a fair question to ask, but I'll ask it anyway.
Okay.
What's the other side of the bargain that makes it worth it?
I was pleasantly surprised because I've always been a person, I grew up very, very poor and in a lot of fear about impoverishment. Like the fear of impoverishment is one of my great fears. And I was always very self-sufficient. I didn't get help from my family. And so accumulating wealth was a big deal for me. And I was an overachiever in advertising. I was a workaholic. I always had a full-time job plus a side gig, plus a couple of other little gigs here and there. And so money was very important to me, to put a roof over my head and have something to eat. I was terrified of becoming homeless. And so to quit my job at the height of my career, I was making more money than I ever had. I had a really good job with good bosses and wonderful coworkers. To say to them, I'm going to walk away from this and be unemployed and homeless for a short period, because when you're visiting the convent at first, they haven't taken you as a sister yet. So I was without a job, and it felt so good. I couldn't believe how good it felt to be free of, I mean, a lot of us would say, probably not you, but a lot of people would say, thank God I never have to walk into a job again, and work 12-hour days and be stressed out. So that part was easier to give up than I thought. And the money part was interesting, because when I came to the community, they would give me $50 a month for my allowance. And I thought, God, it's never gonna stretch. But then I realized there wasn't really anything that I could think of that I needed. My clothes are provided, my shoes are provided, everything is provided for us here from the central fund. I have insurance. And I was thinking, wow, I feel better taken care of than when I was taking care of myself. And it is a nonprofit. We do have, the wolf is always at the door all the time. But somehow God has been getting us through since 1852. So it's very secure.
So I'm just going to press a little bit more on that, because in a way you just said another thing, that God did provide. So when I asked you what you got back when you gave up so many things, you gave an interesting answer, which is one thing you got was the relief from the pressure of thinking you needed things. I think those of us who had parents who were alive during the Depression, we inherited that idea that, we have to think about this all the time. But there's also the God part of that. I mean, can you say a little bit more about that? What sort of communion you feel you attained doing this?
I think it was a giving up of my hyper independence of always taking care of myself, to really trusting in God to take care of me. And that was my mantra when I was driving across the country from Los Angeles to New Jersey, was God will take care of me. God will take care of me. And anytime I would get scared, I would say that. And I repeated it enough times where I started actually believing it. Because at first I couldn't believe it. I was thinking, no, I got to get out there and work. I can't just put this on God. And it developed a much deeper relationship with God, to be able to to turn something over to God in such a big way. And God said, no problem, I've got this. And to have it proven in real time, in real life. It's sort of ever since I came here.
Yeah, it's sort of the ultimate trust fall.
Yes, absolutely.
He caught you. So just quickly, what's a day in the life like for you? What goes on all day?
Our life is a lot busier than people think it is. They think we sort of float around and read books and light candles and things like that. And actually our day is pretty much, we're on the go from 6 a.m. till about 9 o'clock at night. Every day except Monday, which is our day off. And we always think it's hilarious when people say, have a great weekend. And we're like, we work on the weekends. But my day starts at 6 a.m. with private prayer from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. Then we go into lauds at 7:30 a.m., sorry. And then we go into Mass right after that. And then we have silent time until 9:30. We have another prayer service in the chapel. Then we have work time after that prayer service at 9:30. Then we have noonday prayer, and then our lunch. And then we have another work period from 2 to 4:30. Then we have Vespers. And then we have a community meeting after Vespers every day. And then we have dinner. And then we have Compline at 8 o'clock. So you can see that's a pretty full day, even if we didn't work. But we all have jobs.
And you had to master Gregorian chanting.
Oh, yeah, which is still a work in progress.
I wish you could have seen the face she just made.
It's like trying to learn. It's like, because I know how to read music, and I've been singing all my life. My grandfather was a voice teacher, and to look at Gregorian chant, it's like being fluent in French and suddenly being asked to speak German fluently with no training. So I was fluent in one language, and I'm still struggling with Gregorian chant, because I guess the other one was so deeply entrenched in my mind that it's just so different.
You know, you come back as we started. You came from a theater and comedy background, which of course makes me think. I'm in Connecticut, of the Abbey of Regina Laudis. Dolores Hart, who was in, I think she debuted in an Elvis movie, but she was also in Where the Boys Are, and I think King Creole. So she was a movie star. She was a movie star, and she became a nun there, and I think she might have become abbess eventually.
Yes.
But maybe talk about some of the nuns who have inspired. We're going to run out of time here, but I know
That's
either
okay.
from recent history or from deep into history, you have a few sources of inspiration.
Yeah, Dolores Hart was a big inspiration for me because when I was married, I was buying groceries and she was on the cover of People magazine. So I bought it and read about her. And I was like, if she can make it that big of a leap, I think I can too.
Mm.
So all along, she's been a role model for me. And I wrote her a letter and she wrote me back. And I had told her in my letter I felt called to the convent. And she said, you cannot hide from what the hand of God presents to you. And I just burst into tears when I got that letter because it's such a powerful sentence. I thought she probably says it to everybody, but it really changed my life that she wrote back to me. It was very sweet of her. And of course, my role models from the past are St. Clare. My name is Monica Clare. I chose that name because she's one of my role models. St. Teresa, St. Catherine, St. Therese, the little flower of Lisieux. All these, sometimes I'll ask them to pray for us because we don't pray to the saints. We ask them to pray for us. So I ask those role models up in heaven to pray for us.
Well, we're going to talk to a couple of scholars about some of those very role models, but it has been a delight to talk to you, Sister Monica Clare, Sister Superior at the Community of St. John Baptist it's an Episcopal convent based in New Jersey. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's been great. Appreciate it.
All right, we'll take a little break, and we're going to dive back into the 16th century and maybe even deeper to talk about nuns in those times.
Calling all angels, calling all angels, walk me through this, don't leave me alone. Calling all angels, calling all angels. We're trying, we're hoping, we're hurting, we're loving, we're crying, we're calling, 'cause we're not sure how.
She climbs a tree and scrapes her knee. Her dress has got a tear.
She waltzes on her way to mass and whistles on the stair.
And underneath her wimple, she has curlers in her hair.
I've even heard her singing in the abbey.
She's always late for chapel,
But her penitence is real.
she's always late for...
That, of course, is from The Sound of Music. The 60s was sort of a time. It was the first nun corps in some ways, or maybe the first nun corps was in the 16th century. We might wind up saying that. But 60s had the flying nun. Sally Field played a flying nun on a sitcom. And we had the singing nun, who referenced in the first segment, Sound of Music. And we're having another period like that right now. We're going to be talking an awful lot about the nuns of the past, but let's first of all introduce our guest. Ana Garriga and Carmen Urbita are the co-hosts of the podcast Las Hijas de Felipe and the co-authors of Convent Wisdom, How 16th Century Nuns Could Save Your 21st Century Life. Ana got her PhD from Brown University in 2024. Carmen will be getting hers. When you read this book, you will feel like you are in Providence, Rhode Island quite a bit of the time, and you will not always feel happy about it. So first of all, welcome to the show. I do want to talk very much about these fascinating women of the past, but I think we have to spend a moment here in the present We've got Lily Allen's new album is out, and one of the visuals that goes with it, she's in a full habit and wimple having a cigarette break. And Rihanna, I think last year, was on a magazine cover also dressed as a nun. But I mean, in some ways, Rosalia, who is emerging now out of Spain as a gigantic international singing star, is wearing what appears to be a nun's headpiece. I don't know if it's exactly a wimple on her album right now that is making all kinds of excitement. And going along with that is this idea of nuncore. There is, in fact, something called Nun Talk on TikTok. So it does feel as though nuns are having a moment. And maybe one of you could just begin by talking about why that might be.
Well, thanks. First of all, thank you so much for having us. We're always happy to talk about nuncore and nun mania because everyone's obsessed by nuns lately, but we've been obsessed by them for many years. So we're so happy that we can talk about this with anyone now. So yes, we've been following, as you said, Lily Allen, Rihanna, and lately Rosalia's new album, as you said. She portrays herself as a nun, and then she says that she's inspired. Her songs are basically inspired by the stories of many nuns and saints from past centuries. So we're really excited to see this happening. Everyone asks us what's going on, and we have a few responses for that. We don't know for sure, but we think that, I don't know, everything that's happening right now kind of makes you want to just join a convent, kind of.
Well, yes, I mean, even just talking to Sister Monica in the first segment, you can see how there would be some sense of support that maybe doesn't exist in the rest of the world. But Anna, I'm also wondering, and I think you guys have suggested this in the past, that there is, we're seeing an awful lot of testosterone flying around right now, and most of it is manifesting itself in a pretty toxic way. Would that maybe be a reason to put on a habit?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, thank you so much for having us here. Every time that we talk about convent culture, we always put a little bit disclaimer before we start talking. It's not that we are with our book or with our episode, we're not trying to convince anyone to run away to a convent, but we like this idea of the portable convent, that it's precisely linked to what you were saying, that geopolitics right now, everything seems so masculine and so toxic, and with the tech bros and the crypto bros all over the internet, that the idea of a metaphorical or a portable convent, I think that that we are all longing for community right now, and that it seems that a convent, even if it's very open to the world, it gives you that sense of shelter, of a community that has basically a shared purpose, that it's a little bit far away from these very toxic dynamics.
I would imagine, now that you've studied the nuns of that period, 16th century and maybe even earlier, you can maybe see, Carmen, why women became nuns then. I mean, some of it would probably just be to escape having to have 15 children because 7 of them would die and maybe you would die in the process.
Definitely. If you didn't want to marry and you didn't want to risk, as you were saying, dying by giving birth, or even if you just wanted to be with your friends, your sisters, your cousins who might have joined a convent before you, and you didn't want to be separated from them. Or maybe you were obsessed by the idea of becoming kind of a pop icon of your time. You had to become a saint. So the convent was your way, the place where you could do all these things. And it was also, very importantly, it was basically the main place where you, as a woman in the 16th and 17th century, the place where you could write, read, and have write about your own subjectivity at the time. So it was very important. We always have to bear in mind that when we talk about early modern nuns from these centuries, we're talking about a big proportion of women from this time. So it wasn't just this, niche, this very, specific part of society. It was a huge part of it.
So, Anna, I'm wondering what kind of influence these nuns are, particularly on my producer, Lily Tyson. I sent her a somewhat critical email earlier this week, and she wrote back, "Exasperating me is not a good way to correct me, for I do not possess a servile nature that would make me yield to threats rather than to reason." And I thought, boy, you've changed since you started reading that nun book. But Anna, maybe give us a little context for this. Who are we going to?
Well, first of all, congratulations on making a great Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz impersonation. That was great. This is one of the many texts written by early modern nuns that we include in the book. This one precisely is written by the very probably like the most renowned nun from the 17th century. She's the Mexican Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz. She's everywhere. She has like a Netflix TV show devoted to her. She's on the 100 pesos bill in Mexico, and she's one of a kind because she managed to become to the intellectual circles of her time. But also, like this letter that you just read, it's very interesting because it was discovered only in the 1980s, and it's this one letter that it reads as a kind of counterpoint to her other most famous writers, where she's always like developing this kind of like very like rhetorical maneuvers to contest their confessors, but in a very subtle and legitimate way. And in this letter that was for 4 centuries it was just like disappear. She's angry, and she's not afraid to tell her confessor to basically, well, I can't take it anymore. Yeah.
I think you were going to say something else there, but that was good. I want to talk about her a little bit. First of all, one thing that I haven't said that's important is this is a book about your everyday problems, and part of the pretext of the book is that anything that you were worrying about or struggling with or trying to deal with now was worried about and struggled with and dealt with by nuns hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And so, everything is sort of bold-faced, these kind of everyday problems. And we'll get to some of those. In fact, maybe we can use Santa Juana as for emails. But before we do that, I have to tell you, Carmen, we were trying to do a show about polymaths a few years ago, and one thing we were struggling about was that it was harder to find women polymaths just because women were so frequently deprived of education, deprived of opportunities to learn a lot. Sister Juana is a polymath, I think. She did everything. She wrote plays, she wrote music, she wrote philosophy, she was clearly backgrounded on sciences. This is a person who really made an attempt to master knowledge and creativity as it existed at her moment. Maybe you could say a little bit more about, I find this woman really, really impressive.
Sor Juana is incredible. As Ana was saying, she's one of a kind. She was indeed a polymath. Since I think when she started writing when she was like, 10, 12, or even younger. She was examined by all the theologists and the most intelligent people of Mexico at the time, interrogated by all of them about the most difficult questions you could think, and she surpassed all of them when she was only a teenager. So she's really one of a kind, and she was all her life. She wrote all her life, and she was always trying to achieve more and more and more knowledge. As Ana was saying, she was in contact with a lot of intellectuals of her time. So she read it all and tried to write it all as well. Not only sacred poems or sacred literature, but philosophical and scientific writing as well. So, but we also, when we talk about Sor Juana, we also like to say that even though she's definitely one of a kind and she's exceptional, we have to be careful with this, this narrative of Sor Juana or another one being two stories of exceptionalism inside the convent, like they're the only two women nuns who were able to write and be so cultured and so intelligent and to produce so much writing. And even though it's true that Sor Juana was indeed, again, one of a kind, we like to say that all of them, all these nuns, were reading each other and were very aware of what Sor Juana had written, but Sor Juana was aware of what other previous nuns had written. So they were in constant dialogue. So it's not like these isolated figures suddenly stand out. It's more a story of always reading and rereading each other and always being aware of being part of something bigger.
This book really, I don't think that I picked up a book about 16th century nuns expecting to hear, to read Jason Derulo's name or something. But this book is very saturated with pop references. And near the end, Anna, you mentioned Gwyneth Paltrow and Goop, and another way that we can talk about Sor Juana is. In the context of Goop, because Goop is obviously Gwyneth Paltrow giving you all kinds of cures and remedies and moisturizers and things like that. But Anna, if you're ever on a really long donkey ride and you have really, really terrible hemorrhoids so that you can't stand another second because the hemorrhoids are so awful, Gwyneth is probably not going to save you the way Juana could. So tell us that story.
Yeah. So first thing, this is a different Juana.
It's a different Juana.
That we struggle.
Right.
Yeah.
There are too many
a lot in general.
A lot of Marias and a lot of Juanas.
Yeah. And that basically, like most early modern nuns, share the same name. That was basically Maria San Jose and Juana. So this is another Juana that is like early. It's like a medieval nun that is known as Santa Juana, but she never was proclaimed a saint. But she claimed that she had like direct contact with God, and that God had personally blessed all the rosary beads from her personal rosary. And after that, so the relics could work by contact. So like every single rosary bead that was touched by an original rosary bead by Juana suddenly had miraculous powers. So years later, like 3 centuries later, there was this other nun from a convent in Toledo, Spain, that was in charge of founding like the first Catholic convent in Manila in the Philippines. So the travel wasn't easy. It lasted for almost a year and a half. And one of the poor nuns that was going with this nun from Toledo, Spain, was suffering from hemorrhoids, and the solution was to give her a rosary bead smashed in water, and apparently it worked. So who knows? Like maybe we all need that. It's probably better than anything that Gwyneth Paltrow can give you.
Exactly.
All right, we're going to grab a really quick break here with these two wonderful guests. I want to leave lots of time on the other side, so we have lots of ground to cover and not on a donkey. So we'll do that when we get back.
Everybody is wondering what and where they all came from. Everybody is worried about where they're gonna go when the whole thing's done. But no one knows for certain, and so it's all the same to me. I think I'll just let the mystery be. I think I'll just let the mystery be.
You can follow The Colin McEnroe Show on Facebook or Twitter at Colin McShow. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to or following our podcast on any podcast app. It's free. You don't have to wait an hour after eating before you go swimming. That's just something our mothers believed. Back to the show.
All right, we are back. Time to say some thank yous. I'll start with our technical producer, the maestro, Dylan Reyes. This is a Lily Tyson Quality Entertainment Productions production, produced by Lily Tyson, therefore. And Robin Doyen-Aiken, our boss, is here with us because we have special guests. They are not nuns, but they are there in the booth. Nora and Crystalline, welcome to the show. Nora Soros, I should say, and Crystalline, welcome to being with us here in the studio. We have these wonderful guests here, meanwhile, to talk about this very, very interesting book. So Ana Garriga and Carmen Urbita are the co-hosts of the podcast La Hijas de Felipe, and the co-authors of Convent Wisdom, How 16th-Century Nuns Could Save Your 21st Century Life. Carmen, you start the book with the story of a friendship. You actually start it with the story of a friend crush, I think is the contemporary term that you use, and you helpfully explain this at times in the context of Lindsay Lohan and Britney Spears and I forget who else. But explain what this relationship was and why it's the one that you wanted to begin your storytelling with.
Yes. Well, there's Lindsay Lohan is there, Paris Hilton as well, and then Saint Teresa and Maria de San Jose, two Carmelite nuns from the 16th century. The reason we talk about Lindsay Lohan and Saint Teresa in the same chapter, which can be a little bit confusing, is because for us, after so many years writing about these nuns from in a very scholarly writing in a very serious manner, we really wanted to talk about this in a more personal way, to talk about why we were so fascinated by them in the first place, but also why. I mean, there is no way for us to separate reading about these nun stories from pop culture now, because that's everything comes to you at the same time. So we decided to talk about Saint Teresa and Maria de San Jose because they have a really intense friendship. It's like a roller coaster. They were, Maria de San Jose was much younger, and she had a really strong crush with Saint Teresa, because when she first met her, she wasn't still a saint, but everyone kind of knew that she was going to be the big thing, like she was a neat girl, so sort of, yeah. So they became really good friends, and Maria de San Jose always followed her, and once Saint Teresa was dead, she actually followed her reform, and she was like probably her most loyal friend, even though at times she didn't always pay attention to what Saint Teresa said or recommended. So they had kind of a toxic friendship, if I think we can say. But one of the things that we say in the book is that partly because in the convent, these nuns had to live together, even if they didn't like each other that much. The convent really teach you how not to cut loose of relationship at the first difficulty, right? So it gives you a sense of community and of how to continue with friendship, even when it seems impossible to continue with friendship. So we do love Saint Teresa, and we do love Maria de San Jose, and their relationship, their friendship is amazing.
Well, I mean, in everything in this book, Anna, I mean, I feel almost every example that comes up, we get parallels between them and you. Obviously, the two of you became very, very good friends. Although maybe at the beginning, I might have seen you were going to be academic rivals, working on the same kind of subject matter. But there is that sort of idea that, and our first guest said something about academia and convent life being a little bit similar. This is a point that you make over and over, Anna, that there is a kind of set of tribulations that go with your 216 square foot apartment in Providence and eating greasy pizzas and having unfriendly waiters and stuff. That there's a way that you're understanding your lives through these very, very distant lives in the past.
Yeah, definitely. I have to say that we portray Providence and Brown University in the book as way worse than they actually were. Like it worked very well in a kind of like narrative sense to portray ourselves as very miserable creatures, so we could develop this like parallel with the early modern nuns in more convincible ways. But definitely when Carmen and me, when we met, we were 26, 27 years old, and we decided like to start a PhD at Brown University, very far away from home. And even though, as we say in the book, that we kind of knew how, because we were already studying nuns at the time, so we knew how like alive the life of a 16th or 17th century nun in Spain or in New Spain in Mexico was like. We had no idea what academic life could entail. So as the years passed by and we discovered that it was basically to sleep very few hours every day. Also, like, your stipend is not, it's okay, but it's not that high. So you're not allowed to be very luxurious. And also, like, you have to spend every single hour of the day that you are awake reading or writing. And yeah, so at that moment, because we were reading all these autobiographies by nuns, we felt like this strong connection to them, and they truly save us in a way. They made us feel less miserable.
Yeah, and and I love about this book is that every problem you reference is a problem that we can recognize. And Carmen, despite my advanced age, I do experience FOMO, fear of missing out, and social media makes it really bad. And this is something, I mean, I don't think the example that you give is something that most of us can access. This is, by the way, the second time we have talked about this phenomenon on our show, and about Maria de Agreda's way of dealing with this. But first of all, introduce us to Maria and why she feels FOMO. It's part of this is just because if you're a nun, there's just stuff that you don't get to do in terms of proselytizing abroad and stuff like that, right?
Exactly, yeah. Maria Jesus de Ágreda, she's incredible. She's one of my favorites, and I think our favorites. She always lived in the same convent in Soria, a small town, in Ágreda, but a really small place in Spain. She was born into a house which later became a convent, so she didn't even left the house ever. Like she always lived there. But she kept reading this writing by missionary, like friars who went to the New World and got to explore and to do missionary work. And she had to be inside the convent. And she was very curious about cartography, about geography, about many, many things outside of her little world. And she couldn't explore that by herself. So she had a lot of fear of missing out, exactly as we were having a lot of fear of missing out in Providence, Rhode Island, while we were doing our PhD. So when we were reading Maria Jesus de Agreda's writings, we couldn't stop thinking, oh wow, she really has a strong sense of FOMO, like we do. And it's incredible how she dealt with it. So she decided, or maybe she did have the gift of bilocation, which means that she could be, apparently miraculously, she could be inside her cell and at the same time be bilocated in New Mexico. That's what she was writing about. So apparently she was able to travel, and she was able to, make use of all these writings, all these readings that she had already read about geography, cartography, and missionary work, and put that into practice without actually leaving the cell. So we thought it was a very smart move, honestly, and it helped us think also less. It helped us see our relationship with, for example, with social media, which gives you a lot of FOMO. It helps us see it under a different light. Like, it's not so bad if you spend a lot of hours scrolling, seeing what everyone else is doing. A nun in the 17th century felt exactly the same way, and she had her own resources. So maybe you can find yours.
I mean, I know from when we talked to Carlos Ayer about this, that one of the places she seemed to go to was New Mexico, and there were people in New Mexico who saw somebody who looked a heck of a lot like her. So it was kind of interesting. So
they
Anna,
her the name of
no, go ahead.
The lady in blue.
Lady in blue, yeah.
Apparently, this conceptionist blue habit, which is incredible. Yes.
Yeah. So Anna, we've only got 2 minutes left, and that breaks my heart because I really wanted to go through the taxonomy of tears with you because I think it's so great. I think that's St. Catherine. I don't know if we have time for that, but just maybe in a general way, one of the things that you talk about in the book is what you learn from these nuns about love, and that might be a pretty good place to end. And you could just pick any story or any nun that you want.
Yeah, love was, I think that it's chapter 4. So it's just like exactly like the halfway through the book, we decided to write about love. That was the hardest, but also like the most entertaining chapter. And we contrast two different stories. So on the one hand, we had like the story of what we like to call the most toxic lesbians in the early modern period. There were like two, not exactly nuns because they were beatas, so they belonged to a beaterio that was a kind of like a convent, but without like the seal of authenticity. And they were together for years. They dealt with jealousy, polyamory, open relationships of all kinds. They were together for a long time, and we know very well. So their story is very well documented because they had to face like the repression of the Inquisition, so we can learn their story through the inquisitorial trial. But it's, read the book because it's incredible what they have to teach us. And on the other hand, because it's true that both Carmen and me, and I think that everyone who tries like to learn something about, in general, like not heterosexual love in the early modern period, is that you have to face the fact that it's always like through the inquisitorial lens, and it's very voyeuristic and very like it all looks like a movie by Paul Verhoeven, that we also mentioned that in the book. But then we discover like this love story between two Carmelite nuns from the 17th century who were called Ana de Jesús and Beatriz de la Concepción. Ana de Jesús was one of the greatest friends and allies of Saint Teresa. And even though we don't know if there was like actual like carnal love involved, and it really doesn't matter because they were away for like 3 weeks apart, and the letters that they sent to each other is just like incredible.
We're gonna have to say goodbye now. I hate to do it. I do want to remind people of the title of the book, Convent Wisdom: How 16th Century Nuns Could Save Your 21st Century Life. Thanks to Ana Garriga and Carmen Urbita. We'll end with a song about another nun.
Like Bernadette would do. I just wanna hold